Today, friends and family, this is Pastor Green coming to you live. Grace and peace to you from God our Father, the Lord Jesus Christ, who is our resurrected, reigning, and returning Redeemer. Thank you for sharing this time with us again today. We've entitled this unofficially The Conversation. Those of you who've been tracking with us for the past few weeks know that we are in a study through the book of Psalms. We're in a series that we've been called Songs in the Key of Life, where it has been our aim, our objective, to survey the scale of human emotionality. We've talked about anxiety, bemusement, contrition, and today we find ourselves living in the key of D, D for despair. You are free to go back and listen to the sermon on this emotion. This comes from Psalm 142, where David finds himself in the cave. But to extend this conversation and to speak from it or to speak on it from a clinical perspective, I'm excited to welcome our guest this morning to this platform, Dr. Sheila Green, and I'm going to ask her to start her video even now. Come on in, Dr. Green. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you don't mind. Good afternoon, Dr. Green.
Good afternoon, Trenton. How are you, Pastor Green?
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, this is gonna be okay. All right, those of you who don't know, this is my mother. Okay, but Dr. Green, please give us your credentials before we go into this conversation. Thank you again for agreeing.
You're welcome. I have a bachelor's in elementary education. I have a master's in school counseling. I have a doctorate that's in developmental education. I am a licensed professional counselor. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am a licensed professional counsel supervisor. Most of my experience has been in the school system for counseling, of course, educational part. Currently, I am doing some private practice with part owner of behavioral health here in Bastrop.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I'm gonna go ahead and get straight into it. Dr. Green, what can you tell us about the power of emotion?
Gosh, emotions are very, very powerful. Emotions, first of all, we all have them. God gave us emotions. We were born with emotions. Emotions can either make us or break us. They can be beneficial or they can be very, very destructive. But we all have emotions. It's kind of how we use those emotions. We all experience them on a daily basis. Emotions guide us every day of our lives, if you really think about it. We make decisions based on our emotions. If you're happy, you may do this. If you're sad, you may do this. If you're bored, so activities, we even plan out activities based on our emotions. The problem comes in on how we handle them. As I said, they can either make us or they can break us. They're neither good, they're not bad. It's how we handle those emotions, those experiences. And emotions come about as a reaction to something. So, but they're very, very, very powerful.
Sure. So again, one of the action items or objectives of this series, of course, is to encourage the healthy and holy expression of our emotions. And that's kind of what you just alluded to just a moment ago. Wow, emotions, we act out of emotions, or from a, I guess, found foundation emotion? Or are you saying that emotions um, serve as a foundation of sorts to even our actions?
They can. Actually, there is something that happens, and then we have an emotion. There's even something that happens in our bodies as a result of an emotion, but there's usually some kind of a trigger, something that happens. A lot of times it's an experience, an event. A lot of times it's, it can be traumatic event, but there's some kind of an event. I also want to let you know that everybody doesn't experience emotions. Emotions have different dimensions. Some things is a mild irritation, and then sometimes they're, they can be just traumatic. Just it all depends. But we also experience emotions differently. Some people can go out of anger from 1 to 100 and 0. So everybody experiences emotions differently, or they express them differently at different levels. But yes,
Sure,
they guide
sure,
every day of our lives. They're here. They're not going anywhere.
sure, sure. Okay. All right. So again, this week our conversation will be, um, I guess, gathered around the emotion despair, right?
Right.
So what can you tell us about despair from a clinical perspective?
Um, Despair is a very, very common human experience. Okay. We all have probably experienced despair. Despair can come about as a
Mm,
result of losing a job, losing a home, losing a family member. Uh, Finances can cause us to go into despair. Momentary despair is the problem. So we all is very, very human. So I'm going to first of all start by normalizing despair, because we all experience it at one time or another. The problem comes in
sure.
is when it becomes clinical. That means we get there and we stay there, we hunker down in that despair, and we get up every day, we go to work, we may experience, we can go through our normal routines, but still be in despair, and nobody realizes it. It affects when it starts affecting our daily functions, then it becomes clinical. It continues, because if we lose a loved one, if something tragic happens, trauma happens, anything like that, we lose our job, whatever, after a few weeks, you should start to see a little progress. It shouldn't be still holding us down there. But when it gets there and it just stays, it stays, it stays, we wake up with it, we go to bed with it, then we have a serious problem. So it can be normal, a part of life, but we can't stay in it. We can't live in despair. So I will tell you that. That's when we have a problem.
Sure. So in the sermon, of course, and I want you to expand this if you will. Um, I define despair from the American Psychological Association as the emotion or feeling of hopelessness.
Yes.
That is the belief that things are profoundly wrong and therefore will not change for the better. And I said, we usually lump, as we um, do with several other emotions, we usually lump despair with depression,
Right.
right?
Yes.
However, uh, studies show that despair is one of the emotions that we pass along the road or on the journey to depression. So what can you share with us along those lines, along that
Yes.
definition, I guess?
Very, very good. As I said a little bit earlier, with despair, you may get up and you may go to work every day. You go about your functioning,
Sure.
but you have no hope. You have no joy. I kind of consider it as almost like a robot. You have no feelings, no emotions. Whereas depression, you start to withdraw. It can be more serious. So the good point is despair can lead to more serious depression. But with despair, you feel hopeless, you feel helpless, you feel desperation, you feel anxiety. All of these are symptoms of when you're feeling in despair. And like I said, when it goes on and on and on, and it just lasts and lasts, and you've lost all hope, then you're going to be in despair. And if you don't get any help, it's going to lead to more serious, like I say, like depression, where you start to withdraw and become lifeless and those kind of things. So despair does lead, if it's not treated, you don't come up out of it, then it can be a lot more serious. So yes, it does lead to despair, to depression. I'm sorry. Yes, but just that feeling of helplessness, powerlessness. You have no sense of hope. And when you cannot see any hope, then then you're in despair. Then you can be in trouble if you live there. So after a few weeks, you start to be feeling better after after trauma. The symptoms should be lessening just a little bit over time. If they don't, then you have some problems, some serious things that could be happening, going on.
Sure. So the psalm that I selected to go with this particular emotion was Psalm 42, where David finds himself in the cave. And one of these experiences, David and his men are hiding in the cave, and King Saul, who's his enemy, comes in the cave to relieve himself. So I also said in the sermon, and if you can expand this for us, it's when despair happens when stress meets vulnerability.
Exactly. There's something going on. As I said, there's some kind of traumatic event, or it could be a whole lot of events. As with the case of David, you think you met one, you conquered one thing, and then you run up on something else. And this is what we experience in life, like on an everyday basis. Your kids may be doing good, doing bad, you get your kids right, then your husband start messing up, or you lose your job. So it can be a series or repetitive, traumatic, and they just build and they build and they build and they build, and our bodies can only take so much, so much trauma and all those kind of things. And so that's kind of where despair goes. It's just one thing after another, and you don't shake this one off, and you don't heal from this one, and something else, or it feels like you're going in a lot of been pulled in a lot of different directions. The events are just piling up on top of each other. And we all have those moments sometimes. So once again, I want to say that's normal, but you can't just stay there. Get help. That's where the problem comes in, just staying there.
Sure. Okay, so you alluded to it earlier, but to me, what you said earlier, in that despair, people who are despairing and in desperate situations, they get up and go to work every day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that would make it all the more deceptive to me, because you can still be functioning, you can still be filling and meeting goals and objectives, and still be dealing with the emotion of despair. Are there any other symptoms that you can name or mention for us?
If it becomes clinical and it continues, other than the hopelessness, helplessness, powerless, and when you feel powerless, those are the main ones. But it could also become withdrawn, isolation. Even if it depends on how bad it is, it could become where they become suicidal, and nobody would know because they're getting up. There's no joy. One thing I would like to say is as I kind of was putting this together, thinking about it, I thought about Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl can be a role model. He did the Man's Search for Meaning. He was in the Nazi concentration camp, the Holocaust and everything. He stayed in there for 3 years. He was tortured. He was captured along with both of his parents, his wife, and those kind of things. Viktor Frankl survived it. His dad died within 6 months. His mom died later on. His brother died. His wife was killed. When he was finally released 6 months, he wrote this book, Man's Search for Meaning. And what he said was, he described despair. He said that he talked about us having to find purpose and meaning in everything. And he described despair as suffering minus meaning. So even though he said he was suffering, he suffered, he suffered, he suffered, he found a purpose or a meaning, a reason to get up every day. So that's what I want to say. I thought about the DSM was despair equals suffering minus meaning. If we have no meaning for what we're going through, then that can lead us to despair. So we need to find some reason to get up in the morning, somebody that's going to push us, give us a little push to find some joy. Sometimes you don't feel like it because if everything around you feels negative, you may have to go back to someone that's a loved one that's no longer here. It even talked about that even with despair, just getting recognized and somebody diagnosing you with despair, that's a purpose, that's a meaning, that explains why you're feeling the way you're feeling. So once you've given meaning to it, then you can start to come up out of it. So if you're suffering and you don't feel like there's any meaning or there's any purpose for it, then you're going to stay there. So every day, we all need to find a purpose or reason to get up in the morning, something that we can do, something that we can get meaning from every day. And that keeps us out of despair and all these other mental health problems that we can go through. Other thing I would like to say is that our thoughts have so much to do with all of them. You know, I was going to bring that in. Our thoughts control a lot. That in all of these events, we can have a traumatic event, but one of the reasons why people experience them differently is because of our thinking, what we tell ourselves about that event. We can't control events, we can't control people, but we can control our reactions. I'm going to use yours when you talked about the songs in the key of life. If we play the same song in our mind over and over and over, we can either build ourselves up or we can tear ourselves down. If we want to sing the blues, this happened to me. I feel so sorry for myself. Nothing good ever happens to me. We play that song over and over and over in our thoughts or whatever, then we're going to sink lower and lower and lower into despair. So I would say find purpose, find a meaning, even in our suffering. And I find myself saying this a lot. God, what do you want me to get from this experience? So find something while we're going through. There's a purpose, there is a meaning. So try to see it and try to find some joy. That's what I like to say. But I like that. I thought despair, suffering minus meaning is despair.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We've eased into the last question. Is there anything else that you can recommend for us as relates to coping and treatment? Maybe this is an opportunity to push therapy and counseling, but is there anything else that you would recommend for the purpose of coping with despair and, improving
I would also
lifestyle?
Yes, I would like to say that just little exercise, getting up in the morning or in the evening, getting a little exercise, drinking water, diets, finding something, a fun activity. We talk about, of course, God is ultimate. We have to, I think that's the part of us that's going to always be a void if we don't have that personal relationship with Jesus. But I also believe that God works through people, so therapy is also very, very important. We know that God is ultimately in control of all of it, but he puts all of us down here for a purpose, for a meaning. So you can find a good therapist that can work with you. Sometimes medication, we haven't really, discussed that. Medication, can help. Sometimes you need that little burst and that little boost to get your brain re-stimulated and those kind of things, to get those hormones going and all those kind of things back. So sometimes medication is another, option. Medication alone, I don't think is going to do it, because you've got to heal from those traumatic events. You've got to have some kind of healing. Just sometimes it can be a friend, someone that you can trust, someone that can talk to you, someone, as I said, that can make you aware of it. Sometimes we're not even aware of how we're acting. So finding a friend, someone that can challenge you, someone that can push you, someone that can go through the journey with you, is what I would, would be some coping skills. The Bible talks about, like I said, going back to your mind, of renewing your mind, casting down those imaginations and thoughts and those kind of things. We call it cognitive restructuring. So changing that song, that thought, I'm never going to be nothing. I'm a failure all my life. Change that. Because if you think that you're going to be angry or whatever, if something's going to happen and you already tell yourself that, okay, they better not piss me off today. Then if that event happens, you're already ready. So whatever happens after that,
Sure.
we all have our emotional triggers. So changing that song, cognitive reframing, casting down those thoughts, getting a new thought on second thought. And you have to give yourself time to think about what you're thinking about before you react to something. But I think that think about what you're thinking about. We think is something happens and then there's a consequence, but that belief is ABCs, that belief or our thoughts, what we tell ourselves in our mind. So some wait time there, give yourself time to think before you react. We all have our triggers. So a person can trigger your trigger, in other words, or an event can trigger your trigger, something that's there that hasn't been taken care of. So that's what I would like to say. So just get some help from somebody. God is very important. Therapy, there's nothing wrong with it. We've got to get rid of this stigma to think that something is wrong with it. Counseling is dealing with everyday problems. You talk about the songs in the key of life. Life happens to us on a daily basis. So we've got to be ready for it. And we need someone sometimes to cope with it. It's okay. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. All of our behaviors and everything are purposeful based on what we're going through. So we've got to normalize it. And then don't be afraid to ask for help. All right.
Sure. Oh. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Green, for sharing with us today. Maybe share with the good people where they can reach you for this. You mentioned private practice, so where can they find you?
Okay, I am co-owner of Body and Soul Rehabilitation Services. We are located at 803 Briscoe Avenue, or you can also come to our agency at 511 Gumby. Phone number 318-974-6035 is the behavioral health agency. My personal one, 318-282. Maybe I shouldn't give that one. Trina shaking his head. Yeah, that may be a little bit overwhelming. And I'll give you the other office, 318-283-3299. So if you're needing any help or you know anyone, I would be glad. There's so much going on in this world. And that's enough to cause despair, just what's going on around us on a daily basis. So let's get some help. I'm there, along with a lot of other people.
Sure. Sure. So I'm sure they can reach you on social media, Facebook.
They most definitely can. That may be the best way to reach me if you want to reach me personally. I think I took my cell phone number off Facebook, so but you're welcome to send me a DM.
Yep.
And those phone numbers.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much again, friends, for tuning in today. I pray you were blessed. Thank you again, Dr. Green, for sharing with us on this emotion, despair. You all have a good rest of your day. I'm praying for you. Go in the grace of God and may the grace of God go with you. Amen.
Thank you.